Faith. I do not like the word belief as it is commonly used, and I have tried to extirpate it from my vocabulary. Not, however, with perfect success. When a person puts the direct question to me, "Do you believe such and such a thing?" and expects me to answer yes or no, I feel that, by answering yes, I am committing myself to a state of mind so positive that it shuts out further light on the point in question. Many times I have answered, "I neither believe nor disbelieve. I think it is so, but do not know." For that is what the word means, an acceptance of an opinion or a fact without personal knowledge of its truth. The word is associated in my mind with an ignorant assent, and after throwing away dogmatic belief in early years, I have tried to keep my mind open for whatever of new there might come into it and not make hasty judgments. I want to know things. Some things I do know and can prove their truth to others. Many other things are for me practically true, though I cannot prove their truth to others. They appear to me to be true, and the appearance is so strong that it practically amounts to a belief, so that I can hardly dispense with the word after all. But to believe a thing without any knowledge at all, either the knowledge that comes from a clear inner light or an outward experience, is something that is contrary to my nature. And when I am expected to answer yes or no to a direct question about belief, I want to have some idea of what the person who puts the question means by the word. The expression inner light has no meaning for many people, but for some, it has a very great significance. Inner light sometimes makes a truth so clear to the person possessing the light that it is impossible for him not to believe it, even before outward experience has confirmed it, and though all the world may, for the moment, say you are wrong. During the larger portion of the first busy decade, of which I have spoken, after swinging onto a ground of no definite religious belief of any kind, I too was privileged to sit under the liberalizing, optimistic, and truly spiritual teaching of the Reverend Minot J. Savage, then occupying a pulpit in Boston. The seeming deadness to me of everything outside of the senses was gradually lessening, and a new kind of faith in a future life was budding. Not one which had been handed down to me from my ancestors, but one which was destined, in time, to become more real, and my experiences in spiritism, so-called, probably helped on considerably the growth of this new faith. I would not give the impression that, from the very beginning, I actually believed in all that purported to come from the spirit world. But with long-continued experience, and a fidelity on the part of friends on the other side, which seems never to fail, conviction grows, it fastens itself upon one, and cannot be shaken off. Belief in a future life is, as William James puts it, largely a matter of personal feeling. It is, I think, a matter of individual apprehension and appropriation, based partly upon experience in what purports to be communion of some sort with the so-called dead, and partly upon an indefinable quality of the soul which is able to appropriate from the vastness outside of itself, a quality variable in its potency in different individuals, and which one person cannot impart to another. I might offer page after page of communications, yet they would never mean to one who sees them only in the cold type what they mean to me. Personal experience of this kind, therefore, may be a very large factor in the gradual growth of belief, yet not the only factor, and perhaps not the most important. The layman who is eager and thirsting for the truth cannot wait for the dictum of science. And if to him truth is revealed, in some surer and quicker way than by the slow process of scientific experimentation, no one may easily rob him of the personal satisfaction which he derives from such revelation. As one after another of my friends have gone to the spirit world, they have, in turn, become such a vital part of my everyday consciousness that I think about them and speak of them as if they were still actually in my circle of acquaintance and only temporarily out of my sight. I believe that I do converse with them, perhaps not in the fullness of their personality, or the same fullness of clear consciousness that they exhibited during life, but that I do converse with them. That there is, not always, but on many occasions, a clear and distinct understanding between me and my communicator, and a sense of gratification on my part, as of having met and exchanged greetings with some dear old friend. I do not think, however, that if I had not had opportunity with some of the most gifted and highly developed psychics, I should ever have become possessed of so strong a sense of reality and gratification. This I say with the greatest respect for those who possess the psychic gift in a lesser degree. It was not until the passing of the friend who went last to the spirit world that I seemed, somehow, to come into the blessedness of thinking mostly about life and excluding death altogether from my thoughts, of feeling life in the air which I breathe, the sky which I look at, the sun which shines upon me, and the darkness which shrouds and rests me. In fact, life and intelligence everywhere. And the wonderful thing about thus coming into universal consciousness, as it is called, is that it takes away morbid over-anxiety to understand the whole scheme of creation, or nothing. It brings back the natural charm of things, which we felt in our childhood. It puts a new meaning into our common everyday life, and makes it worthwhile to endeavor to make of it a thing of beauty, a thing of power. I do not wish to be understood as uttering any final word on the subject of prophecy, or as really offering any explanation at all. That must be left to the psychologist and the scientist. Nor do I wish anyone to place any reliance whatever on predictions made by psychics from anything I may say. However important the subject of prophecy may be, the predictions themselves form a small part of the mass and the worth of the communications that come through Mrs. Piper. But I offer my personal experience, and, if read aright, I think it will show that the counsel given by Imperator and his group, as it affects an individual life, and the spiritual significance of individual life work, is far-seeing and wise, piercing not merely through a few years, but even through death itself. In 1901, 4 years before the death of Dr. Richard Hodgson, I communicated with him, asking if he would kindly give me some information on the matter of the failure or the fulfillment of prophecy, as it had come under his observation. He replied promptly and at length. At the close of the letter, in which he discussed it fully for my benefit, he gave expression to his own belief in the reality of the transpersonalities, in language so emphatic and so beautiful that I cannot refrain from quoting it here. After his death, copies of this letter were circulated among some of his most intimate friends, none of whom had seen anything quite like it written by him. And this particular passage, or rather the latter part of it, came to be known among these friends as his confession of faith. The passage in question has not been, in every instance, quite accurately quoted, possibly owing to my own misinterpretation of it originally, and then to its getting into print without my having opportunity to correct it. I am therefore tempted to give it here, in Dr. Hodgson's own peculiar chirography, which will be recognized by his many friends to whom his handwriting is familiar. Transcription.
November 24th, 1901. Dear Miss Robbins, I should have replied to yours of 17th earlier, but could not find any copy of the notes, which I now enclose into sheets. But, apart from all this, we must remember that nothing can be regarded as infallible, and I tried to put my general view about this, in the notes a copy of which I enclose. About what Imperator and his group are in their world, I have no doubt. They have done for me, and for some others also, more than everything. But the final written or spoken results, through Mrs. P's inadequate organism, surrounded by our earthly make-ups generally, can only afford us faint glimpses of the great holies, from which they take their origin. We cannot pray too much to do and suffer the will of God whatever it be. I went through toils and turmoils and perplexities in 97 and 98 about the significance of this whole imperator regime, but I have seemed to get on a rock after that. I seem to understand clearly the reasons for incoherence and obscurity, etc., and I think that if for the rest of my life from now I should never see another trance, or have another word from Imperator or his group, it would make no difference to my knowledge that all is well, that Imperator, etc., are all they claim to be, and are indeed messengers that we may call divine. Be of good courage, whatever happens, and pray continually, and let peace come into your soul. Why should you be distraught and worried? Everything, absolutely everything, from a spot of ink to all the stars, every faintest thought we think, up to the contemplations of the highest intelligences in the cosmos, are all in and part of the infinite goodness. Rest in that divine love. All your trials are known better than you know them yourself. Do you think it is an idle word that the hairs of our heads are numbered? Have no dismay, fear nothing, and trust in God. Yours sincerely, Hodgson.
I give also extracts from a second letter in reply to my acknowledgement of the above. Transcription.
Boston, Massachusetts. December 1st, 1901. Dear Miss Robbins, just a word or two in reply to your kind letter of November 27th. Thanks for the document returned. Of course, we get misrepresented and misunderstood in all sorts of ways. In the old years, when I was prominent in exposing fraudulent mediums, spiritualists generally used to revile me as a gross materialistic skeptic who had no other object but the persistent determination to disprove spiritualism. Nothing could have been further from the truth, even then. And now, as you rightly say, in recent years, with the Imperator regime, another influence has come which I trust, even to the end and after. With all my darkness and weakness and blunderings and brutenesses I shall not escape, which I trust will abide with me ever, for it is law and love and peace and freedom and joy and God. Yours ever, Richard Hodgson.
These letters speak for themselves and need no comment from me. Let me say once more that I have been repeatedly and continually urged by those on the other side of the veil, since 1900, and more especially since 1902, to offer to others something of my experience and something of the comfort which I myself have received. And the end is not yet. September 1909. Part 2. Communications from the Other Side of the Veil, through Mrs. Piper. Prefatory Explanations. Up to the beginning of 1906, I never dreamed that I should arrive at the point of publishing reports of my own sittings with Mrs. Piper. The reports were not mine to publish, as they were all in the hands of Dr. Hodgson, and he held them by right of his office as Secretary of the Society for Psychical Research. For some years previous to his death, the condition on which most or all of the sittings were allowed was that a report of some kind should be made to him. Every sitter, of course, retaining the right to withhold whatever was considered of too intimate and personal a character to disclose. He himself accompanied many of the sitters and made his own records. It was my habit to make very full reports. On my proposing, on one occasion, to omit some talk about my health, which I did not presume was of interest to anyone but myself, he insisted that I should give him every word that I possibly could, saying that he had been working for years to obtain verbatim reports of these sittings, and that, of the few people whose communications came by voice, I happened to be the only one who was accustomed to the more rapid reporting. Therefore, I gave him much that I would not think of allowing to be published. On the understanding between us that before he made any use of these records, by way of publications of his own, there would be opportunity for the reconsideration and the withholding of certain portions. I gave him these full records for the purpose of enabling him, as a psychologist, to form a better judgment of the value of a sitting as a whole. He also expressed to me his opinion that, in the publication of records, it is better to make use of real names, as far as possible, rather than pseudonyms. Although he recognized that there are many considerations entering into the question, and that this cannot always, or perhaps often, be done. The sudden death of Dr. Hodgson altered entirely the situation of affairs. In May 1906, the authorities, in issuing an announcement of the proposed dissolution of the American branch of the SPR, made the following statement: "The Piper records, and all documents appertaining thereto, will remain in charge of the Council of the Society. And, as promptly as the labor involved in the study of their voluminous and complicated contents will allow, a full report on the later developments of the Piper case, up to the date of Dr. Hodgson's death, will be issued in the proceedings. After publication, the Council of the Society will allow qualified and serious students access to the records, but only on terms which will ensure that all private and intimate matter contained in them shall be handled with proper discretion and reserve, and that all confidences shall be respected." My own reports were included, with my consent, in the mass of documents which were transferred to London. As I am not now publishing complete records, I make this explanation to show that I have made some slight contribution to the files of the English SPR. And it is possible that the person who summarizes the contents of all the documents, or the serious student who examines them, may find in my small portion some good tests or some few points of psychological interest, which I have not thought best to reproduce in this volume, my special object being to offer the running conversation, rather than the test, with its detailed explanation and corroboration. The reports of my sittings are, therefore, the property of the SPR, and I have no right to publish without the permission of that society. On November 7, 1907, the council of that body voted to give me permission to publish extracts from my own reports, on the understanding that I should publish also an acknowledgement of the permission, together with the statement that the council is in no way responsible for anything I may say, and I hereby absolve the Council of the Society for Psychical Research from responsibility for any and every word which I publish. At an earlier date, September 26, 1906, I received what purported to be a communication from Richard Hodgson himself, as follows:
"If you wish to extract anything from those reports, you have my consent to do so, and I hope the consent of the Council."
When scientists first undertook the study of mediumistic phenomena, the particular test was considered the all-important thing, and comparatively little attention was paid to anything else. More recently, voluminous and characteristic talk on the part of a communicator has been considered valuable and even evidential in its way. Professor James H. Hyslop, in his work entitled Science and a Future Life, says, "What we must have is psychological phenomena, and psychological phenomena of that kind which represents the systematic mental action natural to the person whose existence is in question." Still more recently, even descriptions of life on the other side of the veil, which of course cannot stand at all as positive proof of the truth of the matter, are being sought after. And I have been told, by a leading psychologist, that, when we have a mass of non-evidential matter, it will sometime have a bearing on the value of what is strictly evidential. I am not offering my communications as evidence, in the strict sense of that word. I am offering them simply for what they are, expecting that each reader of the first portion of this volume will peruse or omit this portion as he sees fit, and that each one will judge of it for himself. I realize that when I lock myself into an upper chamber, with one other person only, and that person goes into a state of unconsciousness and talks, What I bring out as a record of that talk must depend much for its value upon whatever reputation I myself may have for being a truthful recorder, if I am so fortunate as to have any. It should be understood that, in the latter years, nearly all the communications coming through Mrs. Piper are in automatic writing. It is only at an occasional sitting, or only for certain sitters, that the communications are given through the voice. Many prefer the automatic writing, and for the purpose of scientific experimentation, it is considered, I understand, more valuable. The writing that is produced can be preserved as the actual communication and cannot be disputed. However, the writing itself is not by any means the whole story, and in order that it be perfectly intelligible, all questions and remarks interjected by the sitter must also be accurately recorded. Nor is this all. The story is not then complete, unless one knows how to make notes of and interpret, more or less correctly, the various and significant gestures of the hand, which appears to be sensitive and alive, as if an actual intelligence were seated in it. Therefore, I cannot see why, either at a voice sitting or at a writing sitting, much has not to be trusted to the person who does the recording. Although, still more perhaps, must be trusted to the person who does the interpreting in cases where recorder and interpreter do not happen to be one. I have a great mass of communications extending through the years, and can only publish extracts from them. I have decided that it is best to confine these extracts, almost entirely, to communications from one personality, giving continuous talk, which in a voice sitting has much fewer breaks than occur in the writing. There is not in my case, as exists in many cases, any special reason why I should withhold the identity of the one who has been my special communicator of recent years, namely, Augustus Pearl Martin. In fact, it is for the very reason that he was widely known, in both public and private life, in the city of Boston, that I am speaking openly and freely and offering communications, which purport to have come from him since his passing out in 1902. I am also desirous of making my offering without further delay, and before his strong personality shall have become dim in the memory of his large acquaintance. I am hoping thereby to interest people in my subject who as yet know little about it, or who have hitherto taken no special interest in it. I do not consider that I have any right to publish this name, however, against the wishes, or without the express consent of the nearest surviving relatives. This consent I have obtained, as will appear in the following copy of a letter written by the widow, and endorsed by the son.
769 Morton Street, Dorchester, Massachusetts. May 10, 1908. My dear Miss Robbins, I have no objection to your publishing the name of my late husband in connection with your work with Mrs. Piper, if you choose to do so. I appreciate the great assistance you rendered him during the last years of his life, and can assure you that his friendly feeling for you was shared, not only by myself, but by all the members of my family. I have known of your long-continued interest in psychical research, and, if he were here today, I am sure he would trust your judgment in any matter of this kind. I would prefer not to have details concerning myself or my family published, but otherwise you are at liberty to use the name as you see fit. Yours sincerely, Abby F. Martin.
I most heartily endorse the above. Everett F. Martin.
There have been anxious inquiries and loving messages from members of his own family, but most of these I must omit. Many references to other persons also, friends and relatives of my own, must be omitted. Where there is a decided change in the subject of the running talk, if it is something that must be omitted, I have indicated the omission by dotted lines. Omissions of single words or brief phrases, which do not in the least affect the sense, some of which are made merely to avoid repetition, I have not indicated. and must ask the reader to place confidence in the discretion I have tried to exercise on these points. Some personal references must be omitted in any case, and one object for adopting the method of abbreviating here indicated is to make the record more readable. The technical report of the automatic writing, with all its confusions, breaks, and undecipherable scrawls, is fascinating reading for the student, but is often, by reason of its unintelligible technicality, unattractive to the average reader. Further than this, it is only necessary for the uninitiated to remember that all remarks enclosed in round brackets are my own. All remarks enclosed in square brackets are not a part of the sitting, but simply my explanatory notes. All of the remainder of the record represents what is said by the communicating spirit. It hardly seems necessary for me to make the statement here, and at this late day, that the possibility of Mrs. Piper's seeking information in a normal way, to give out in her trance, was years ago entirely dropped from the consideration of her case by those familiar with it. She, of course, must be more or less familiar with the names of men who have been in the public eye. She had only the very slightest personal acquaintance with my communicator when he was living, never having met him more than once or twice, and then only casually. She has never seen one of my reports, nor had she any idea, up to within a few months of date of publication, that I intended to publish, at which time I obtained her full consent to publishing whatever relates to her in this volume.